Good evening, voters. Time and again, we have discussed the pathetic air quality of our national capital, especially in the run-up to the winter season. And once the winter season is here, the pollution levels skyrocket. And every time, it's the same story. One government pointing fingers at the other government. It's the AAP government who blames the neighboring states and the centre. While all of them say we are doing our best, it is the AAP government that's failing to do what
good evening, ma'am. Can you hear me?
Really crack down on. Time and again, we've debated every court, every Green Tribunal order that has pulled up various authorities, from the pollution control boards to the Environment Ministry at the state and the centre level. So tonight we thought, if the Delhi government has come out with a draft policy for electric vehicles and for other steps to crack down on pollution, let's look at those steps and see just how crucial or beneficial will they be. Let's debate, analyze and understand this draft policy that the Delhi government has come out with. Now the headline, of course, is that they want to bring in electric vehicles. They want about 20 to 25% of the Delhi transport to be electric vehicles in just the next 5 years. How are they going to do that? They're going to incentivize people to buy these electric vehicles. But on the other side, there will be a penalty, or rather an additional tax, if you use other polluting vehicles. If you use an Uber and Ola, should you be charged more because it's adding to the pollution of the city? If you use a petrol or diesel vehicle, should you be charged more and taxed more because it is adding to the pollution of the city? And just how much time do citizens need to get used to this idea? Because the Delhi government wants to implement a lot of this by next year. So that is a big debate. But before we go to our panelists, take a look at this detailed report.
A thick blanket of smog and haze engulfed Delhi and its nearby regions this morning. Delhi is witnessing yet another toxic winter season.
Delhi has been very desperately battling the issue of vehicles, public vehicles that are available for public usage. You see, there is already a paucity of the buses in the national capital. You don't have the exact number of buses which are actually needed for the entire population to be catered for. Secondly, there is an extremely high inflow of trucks that go through Delhi. They are not exactly supposed to be in Delhi. They pass through Delhi. So that too accounts for a lot of pollution.
So the Delhi government has now come up with another plan to curb pollution. The draft of Delhi Electric Vehicle Policy of 2018 is out now and open for public comments.
The Delhi government is ready with its Electric Vehicle Policy 2018, and what is pertinent to note in the policy is that they are giving incentives to those who will opt for electric two-wheelers as well as push towards public transport to opt for electric e-cabs as well as e-autos and e-rickshaws. However, the government feels that it is important to stress on the fact that the polluter has to pay, which means that a pollution cess along with a congestion fee of 2.5% of the fare of your Ola and Uber cabs will also be proposed to be added.
We are working on a blueprint where every 3 kilometers or from any part in Delhi, within 3 kilometers, you should be able to access battery charging stations as well as a battery swapping station. Right. And once that is going to be available, the idea of range anxiety, where people say that if I buy out, what if I run out of battery, should not be there. And I feel that somewhere, all of us who live in Delhi also are so concerned about pollution that we shouldn't mind that if there are, if a little bit of the money from our own polluting vehicles is going into funding cleaner and greener model of alternatives, as long as that money is well spent, I think we should support the government policy for that.
For us who are vehicle owners, if we are polluting, we must pay. It's simple as that. Let's start an awareness exercise for Delhi citizens. It's not only just saying that I'm giving an incentive. Tell them that this will really reduce your pollution. It will make you healthy. That awareness has to start. Have some EV zones in the crowded places like Chandni Chowk, etc. or tourist places. Don't allow any other IC engine vehicle to be there.
So tonight we ask, Is the new draft policy introduced by the Delhi government, if implemented, going to help curb pollution in the national capital? Is it fair to make citizens pay when the government has failed in curbing other polluters? Debate begins now.
Well, while Delhi may be exploring these ideas, perhaps citizens across the country also need to sit back and think if some of these ideas can be implemented in their cities. It's not as if in Bengaluru or Mumbai or in Lucknow and Kanpur and Calcutta the air is any better or cleaner. Let's say good evening to our panelists. Vimlendu Jha, an environmentalist, joining us this evening. Mr. Jasmine Shah, he will be representing the Delhi government, and the AAP's view tonight. You just heard an excerpt of his interview with us earlier in the day. Bhavreen Khandari, spokesperson for My Right to Breathe. Ashim Sanyal, COO for Consumer Voice. Let me start with Bhavreen. And Bhavreen, what is your own sense? One aspect, of course, is to push the electric vehicles and to set up an atmosphere and an environment where they can be easily used. But the other aspect is to disincentivize people who are using other polluting vehicles. Do you think this is a good idea that Delhi should adopt? Yes, Bhavreen Khandari, the question is to you, please. Hmm. Hmm. Okay, so point taken. The main issue that you're highlighting is if you do not have a strong public transport infrastructure, is it fair for you to ask me to spend more money to change my vehicle in such a short amount of time without giving me an alternative? Now, Mr. Shah, note down these points because I'm going to come to you for a response on these tonight. It's not a political debate. It's just a conversation on the draft policy that the Delhi government has come out with and the pros and cons. Mr. Ashim Sanyal, good evening to you. As a consumer voice, what is your own view? The path may be difficult, but is it high time that we go down this path?
Yeah, first of all, as I was saying, in fact, I must compliment the Delhi government for introducing a well-drafted, a well-crafted, and a well-researched document in terms of Delhi public transport policy, I must say, because it lays a lot of emphasis on public transport, which is right now missing in the element of calculation. But at the same time, this is like any other policy paper of the government. It is an ambitious, I would say, a rather over-ambitious program where things have been taken into silos, and then the whole thing has been constructed as a policy paper. By that, what I mean is basically that we don't have things that are supposed to emerge after the 5 years of so-called implementation plan. And those structures are absolutely essential for implementing this particular thing. Now let's come down to certain basic statistics in terms of the amount of pollution that is caused by fuel. In fact, statistics say that 30% of the so-called pollutant are coming from fuel. And remember, Delhi public transport systems run on CNG, which actually eliminate microcarbon particles and benzene, besides other pollutants. Now, once upon a time, this was supposed to have been the best solution, so it was implemented in Delhi as one of the first cities. It is important for us to understand that many of the students appearing for this kind of an exam where they study the policy, they draft a policy, will definitely fail because of simple reason that we don't know the jigsaw puzzle that is going to come up shortly after such a draft policy has been announced. As you were mentioning, I think this is a very important chapter where public transport system comes into limelight, and very rightly the government has also focused on it. But having said that, there are other measures that need to go hand in hand with the public transport policy, which are absolutely essential for controlling pollution in Delhi. We know that there are pollutants like crop burning around Delhi. In fact, there are pollutants like waste burning. There are pollutants in terms of constructions. So there are many other factors which contribute that. And with Delhi's bypass being constructed at a frantic pace, I think out of the 30%, 15% of the pollution would automatically go away with the passing trucks moving or the buses moving out of Delhi.
Right.
But it is important for us to understand what does this draft policy means to a common citizen. It is taxing someone at the cost of someone else who is being subsidized. Now, is that fair? My point is, today, if you are able to generate this kind of a surplus or a reserve for this draft policy to be implemented, it is fine. But depending on taxing the people who are not going to use electric vehicles, because of maybe cost, because of other factors, because the infrastructure may not be in place, taxing them heavily is definitely not a consumer-centric approach.
Okay.
It is going to be a burden very soon, and we will realize the shortcomings in terms of infrastructure, because the entire policy rests on actually the government.
It comes down to where is your public infrastructure. Yes, I get that, Mr. Sanal. So it comes down to where is your public transport infrastructure that is ideally needed to support this kind of a scheme. So let me ask Mr. Shah to explain to us. Mr. Shah, when to your mind, will we be ready by 2019 with the necessary number of feeder buses and main buses and other metro routes to actually ensure that people can use that and give up on their polluting vehicles?
Let me begin by first saying that building a sound public transport system is an absolute must, and a good electric vehicle policy is not a replacement for a public transport system. In fact, the first effort of Delhi government for the last 3 years has been to strengthen the public transport system in multiple ways. And I'll just sort of very briefly lay out what has already been done. So the bus depot capacity has been increased by 40% of what was existing in the last 3 years itself. Close to 3,000 buses now are under the procurement process, and many qualitative changes are being undertaken, like a common mobility card is being undertaken, route rationalization is happening so that people can find bus routes at a regular and a reliable frequency and close to their homes. Bus safety related issues are being taken care of in terms of CCTVs being installed, bus marshal scheme. So there are a number of initiatives, and the first and foremost priority is to ensure that people do not have to or minimize the use of private vehicles and opt for public transport. Having said that, the next challenge is, what do we do with the burgeoning number of private vehicles that people in Delhi need to use or have to use? And that is where this electric vehicle policy comes in. And the fundamental sort of approach that this electric vehicle policy lays out is to tackle all the hurdles that we have seen as far as adoption of electrical vehicles in India has been concerned in a very, very holistic fashion. And what are these? First and foremost, the price of the electric vehicles is very, very high. Second, there is almost non-existent charging infrastructure. And third, you really do not see a reason why to chuck your petrol and diesel vehicles and actually opt for an electric vehicle. So some kind of a fee-based sort of a policy where you actually have to pay a little bit higher fee for opting for a polluting vehicle when you could have gone for an electric vehicle, which is what we want to incentivize through this policy, needs to be in place. And more than anything else, this policy lays emphasis not on cars, which is how electric vehicle policies have been implemented all over the world, but in India and especially in Delhi, two-wheelers and three-wheelers contribute to 12% of the entire pollution, as well as whereas cars contribute only to around 3.4% of the pollution. So for the first time, as compared to many other states that we have studied in India, this policy lays emphasis on two-wheelers and three-wheelers, and as one of my panelists pointed out, public transport and buses. And as part of that, 1,000 electric buses are already under the procurement process by the government.
Okay. 1,000 electric buses are in the procurement process. Go ahead, please finish that point.
Yeah. No, so absolutely. So as I said, there is a larger plan towards which the Delhi government is working. And somebody did mention that this sounds to be impracticable or over-ambitious, but that's exactly what we want to convey, that we realize that the situation in Delhi in terms of the environmental crisis is very, very severe. It is extraordinary, and therefore you need a policy measure that deals with that in an extraordinary manner. This is similar to what the odd even plan did. It was an emergency plan. People felt that this is perhaps far too difficult, but people responded to it. So our belief and our hope is that even when it comes to mass adoption of electrical vehicles, a policy framework like this will actually cause, for the first time in any city in India, a mass shift towards buying electric vehicles. But as I said again, this is not a replacement for building a sound public transport system.
Of course it's not. The question is not whether this is a replacement for building up a strong public transport, but whether your public transport infrastructure and plan is strong enough to facilitate this without making it so painful for the citizens is the point that was being raised by the other panelists. Vimlendra Jha, but do you agree on the argument that the situation is so dire now in Delhi and so many other cities as well in our country that perhaps it is time to put this on a fast track?
See, Tanvi, the thing is that, I'm not able to breathe right now as I speak. The camera person from your channel right now has also been complaining about bad air. Situation is extreme right now in Delhi, and what we actually are talking about still is just yet another policy. As much as I want to congratulate Delhi government and Mr. Shah right now, that they acknowledge the fact that yes, vehicles do pollute, because all this while last 2 months, we've actually heard from Delhi government that the neighbors pollute and not the vehicles of Delhi, not the thermal plants of Delhi, or not the dust of Delhi. So at least there's an acknowledgement of the fact that yes, Delhi has its own set of issues that they want to address. That's point number one. Point number two is that yes, of course we need electric vehicles, we need non-polluting vehicles in Delhi, and of course we need something more than just a policy. But yes, as Bhavreen said and many other people have said, that at the end of the day, 92% vehicles are private, only 8% is public. But what the transformation that we actually require right now, the shift and the focus of policy in a case of emergency that we actually want right now is in our public transport infrastructure, public transport political will than in private transport in that sense. Glad, fine, there is a policy, but do we actually have an infrastructure in place to really power this electric vehicle revolution that Delhi government is talking about? If it works, very well. But given the situation right now, because Delhi has actually seen a CNG infrastructure which has been completely devastated, we've seen queues outside these pump stations, outside CNG stations, in all these at least a decade right now. Then there's a new policy that it says that yes, there will be 25% of vehicles that will ply on Delhi roads will actually be electric. Good idea, but how will you execute this idea? Because every other idea that we have actually seen that could perhaps be possible by our respective governments, including the Delhi government and the central government, hasn't really been shown any results. So as much as it looks amazing, beautiful, sounds carbon neutral, carbon friendly on paper, we don't really know what exactly and how exactly will the government transact this particular policy, because you and I, all of us know that there are only 4 brands that actually make electric vehicles. You and I all know that 70% of electricity in India is actually churned out through thermal power plants. So at the end of the day, even that electric vehicle will be powered by a polluting thermal power plant. You and I all know that the average electric vehicle in our country right now only can ply from 30 kilometers to 70 kilometers a day. We do not know where will they get their land from. So as of now, in the season of conversation of, we are all in an amazing season talking about air pollution. We forget about it in the month of December. It's good to have a timely policy, a timely narrative about combating air pollution. How much of it will actually churn result, how much of it will actually really mean the intent of the government, because we've seen the government actually completely fail on every other front. Within vehicular pollution front, it has failed because there's no public transport, whatever be the reason. The other source of pollution, dust that we talk about, construction, demolition dust, government has terribly failed. It has no control, no access, no idea how much of construction and demolition dust there is. There's no control that Delhi government or the central government has on other sources of pollution, be it waste burning, that we're talking about. The number of trees that's actually been chopped in Delhi in the last 3 to 4 years has been terrible. Almost 18 to 20,000 trees minimum has been chopped off. So when we have all those main causes of pollution there, we have a policy which looks like a hopeful policy. Congratulations, Delhi government. How much of it will actually churn result? How much of it will actually have an impact on my air that I'm breathing right now? We will see. Time will tell.
So, Vimrendu Jha there saying that while it looks good on paper, we don't know how realistically practical this is, because here is what the Delhi government's draft policy suggests, viewers. That they want 25% of all new vehicle registration to be electric vehicles by 2023. This will include e-two-wheelers, electric two-wheelers. This will include e-two-wheeler taxis. This will include more of e-rickshaws, and they're coming out with incentives for people who want to buy these e-rickshaws, incentives for passengers who will end up using these electric vehicles. They go on to say that we will have 50% of our entire public transport system to be electric. 50% of the entire public bus transport system to be the entire public transport system to be electric by 2023. So then, do you have the infrastructure to set it up? That's the other question. But before I go back to Jasmine Shah, Deepak Merwani is on the phone line. Viewer calling us from Delhi. Let's also listen into what he has to say. Go ahead, please. Good evening, Deepak.
Yeah, good evening. This is Deepak Merwani, and I'm actually a victim of this pollution. I have a sore throat, bad throat, in fact bleeding. It's only because of the pollution. The doctor says it is because of the pollution. Now, I have a few questions for the Delhi government while they're drafting a policy. Hello? Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. Go ahead, please.
Okay. So, while they're drafting a policy, how much of the homework have they done? I heard a gentleman talking about the construction dust, and he's bang on. There is a large-scale construction dust. The trees have been cut, close to 25,000. There are vehicular emissions, all right, but as the winter sets in, are the Delhi government aware that Haryana, Uttar Pradesh, Punjab, the crop burning, the rice startlates, 35 million tons of crops are burnt every year. The wind carries all the pollutants and dust particles which get locked in the air. What is the policy about that? And why are you drafting a policy just few months before the election? Where were you last year? Where were you a year before that? You're just doing it to earn votes.
Right. Okay, point taken, Deepak, and I'm going to ask Jasmine to just respond on that. But I also want to bring the attention of our viewers to what is the breakup, according to experts, about the Delhi pollution. 26 to 29% of it is caused by the stubble burning, majority of which takes place outside of Delhi and then impacts the air quality of Delhi. 20 to 27% is because of the road dust, which is why every time the pollution worsens, the air quality worsens, we talk about sprinkling water and spraying water on the streets to settle this dust down. 23 to 28%, which is still a big amount, is because of vehicular pollution. And that includes all kinds of vehicles. 19 to 35% is due to construction. So now, Jasmine, do you want to respond to some of the points that were raised? One on the infrastructure for this entire shift to electric vehicles that you are aiming for by 2023, and the other one saying, what are you going to do about the other things, about the illegal construction, about the stubble burning, and I mean, a lot of it you can't do anything about, but even the road dust and the construction activities.
So I'm just wondering what the actual question is, because when the stubble burning issue is at its peak, and many of our spokesperson do rightly point it out that this is the time that we need to crack down on all North Indian states which are guilty of that. The complaint is, what is Delhi government doing about the local sources of pollution? So the point is that yes, pollution is a very complex issue, and it is first of all a regional issue, not just an issue for Delhi. And therefore, all governments in all, especially the North Indian states, need to do all within their measures to fight the various sources of pollution. As for today, what the Delhi government has released is its vision and its plan to cause a drastic shift in adoption of electric vehicles. And we are very, very happy if anything is found amiss, if there is anything that can be done further to improve the transition to electric mobility. That is the reason we have put this plan out, so that we can include those comments and really move Delhi in the right direction with the help and with the support of people of Delhi. Now, in terms of the infrastructure, yes, absolutely, this is a 5-year plan for Delhi, and a lot of thought and planning has gone into it. So, for example, the first and foremost question in the mind of anybody who would like to buy an electric vehicle is, where would he go for public charging? And that is why the draft policy very clearly lays out, the plan for both incentivizing private buildings owners and people who own non-commercial and commercial buildings to put charging points at their locations, as well as for public charging infrastructure. And we've identified bus depots, we've identified metro stations, and all the existing car parking lots where these kinds of charging points will be put in place. And more importantly, the reason why we believe this will work is there is a huge emphasis on battery swapping as against battery charging, which is laid out in this particular policy. So as against battery charging, where you would have to put in your vehicle for maybe 15, 20, 30 minutes, battery swapping is a very promising technology, indigenous technology, lot of work happening in India in institutes such as IIT Madras. And we have seen models where within 1 or 2 minutes, a vehicle which is out of battery gets recharged and gets on its way. So, and at the same time, over the last 1 or 2 years, we are seeing a lot of new models come in the market. So, Vimlendu mentioned that only 30 to 40 kilometers range. Actually, that's not true. 80 kilometer range two-wheelers have begun, appearing in the market. And if you look at the normal run of such two-wheelers, and Delhi has, let's also remember that 70% of new vehicles registered in Delhi, as well as the total stock of vehicles in Delhi, is two-wheelers. And this policy also lays a huge emphasis and offers a very steep scrapping incentives for some of the most polluting, which are the BS2 two-wheelers. So it is not that this policy has been drafted in closed
so what do you
doors or anything.
So
I'm not saying
two-wheelers
that
are used by a two-wheelers are used by a very specific category and economic class in our society. Now, if you're asking them to scrap those polluting two-wheelers and move on to these electric vehicles, how are they expected to bring in that amount of money? And I'm asking you this because I was just going through some of the questions that our viewers are asking, and they're saying that how are you expecting the Delhi people to buy such expensive electric vehicles, Jasmine?
So first, and that's an excellent question. Let me answer that now. First and foremost, one of the biggest reasons why the shift to electric two-wheelers hasn't happened in India so far in that larger measure is that the price of the high-powered electric two-wheelers. So there are plenty of low-powered two-wheelers which are, the maximum speed is up to 25 kilometers per hour. But what normally people like to buy is a high-powered electric two-wheeler. And there has been a substantial price difference between electric two-wheelers, which are more expensive than petrol two-wheelers. Because of the slew of incentives that Delhi EV policy offers, you would see for the first time anywhere in India, the price of electric two-wheelers not being just equal, but actually being around 80 to 90% only of a regular petrol two-wheeler. And that's exactly how a country in Asia, Taiwan, has been the most successful in almost causing a big shift from petrol-based two-wheelers to electric two-wheelers. And the second thing is this entire idea of incentivizing battery swapping technology, because then what you do is you're not paying upfront for the price of the battery, which further brings down the cost of your vehicle when you buy it. So all these measures combined will ensure that when this policy is implemented, right out of a showroom, if you go for an electric two-wheeler, a high-powered, high-quality electric two-wheeler, you may actually end up paying only as much as 80% of what you would for a petrol two-wheeler. And there is no compulsion that people who own a old two-wheeler have to scrap it. There is no force being applied on anyone. But the government has made it very meaningful and possible that if somebody wants to scrap their old two-wheeler, and if they actually scrap it through the right process, then they would actually get a scrapping incentive and will further reduce the price of their electric two-wheeler.
Okay, let me ask our other panelists then. Are they convinced with what Jasmine Shah is saying? Vimlindu, let's begin with you.
So, Tanvi, the thing is that, of course, as I said, that we are talking about better electric bikes, we're talking about better electric cars, we're talking about everything. As in, so, you know, from an academic, Jasmine, I understand where you're coming from. Academically, it sounds very, very good draft policy. Like, yes, whether we should have every 3 kilometers a charging point, a battery swapping system, a subsidy of a particular kind, all of this, given the fact that the regime and the country that we all are living in right now, do you see this happening? So if your priority is to really solve the air pollution crisis of India, is this the best that you could have done to solve the air pollution situation in our country? That's my point number one. Point number two is that right now, all these vehicles that we're talking about, we don't see these heavy power two-wheelers or heavy power four-wheelers in our country. You say because of your policy it will come. Of course, Maharashtra and Telangana also has a very similar electric vehicle policy. We haven't really seen these things happen there. If it happens, good. But right now, from a government point of view and from a governance point of view, should our focus not be on many other issues of air pollution, and should our focus not be on public transport? Because of course your electric vehicle policy right now says that you are going to add 1,000 more electric vehicles or 1,000 more electric buses. But the deficit is much more bigger. And at the end of the day, what the citizens of Delhi are asking for is concrete action rather than yet another dream, yet another pipe dream. I asked you a very simple question, Mr. Shah. Where will you get the electricity from? You know, the 70% of electricity in our country is still thermal power. It's still powered by thermal power plants. We don't have that infrastructure. Have your government or any other government been able to solve the crisis of CNG infrastructure? In front of us, lack of CNG infrastructure is playing, and you're telling us that every 3 kilometers you'll actually have a battery swapping system. We don't believe you. If you can do it, good. Plus, also do things on other aspects.
Okay. Let me also bring in...
Let me just respond to that. Let me make a brief response to that, because somewhere this entire debate is being wrongly framed as an either or. If we are doing electric vehicles, we are not doing public transport. If we are doing electric vehicles, we are not doing something about industrial sources of emissions. And I must categorically state that neither is the intent. But somewhere, the narrative should not be seen in a manner that this is the only thing that the Delhi government is doing. Let me remind everyone that earlier this year, in March, the Deputy CM of Delhi put out a 26-point green budget action plan encompassing the Environment Ministry, the Power, Transport, PWD, and Forest Ministry. And it lays out a very comprehensive framework. There are very concrete initiatives. For example, how do you shift the use of polluting fuel in industries to PNG? There are also plans in terms of how the Environment Ministry is going to deal with the various other sources of pollution. So, and of course, the public transport, I have already recounted the multiple number of initiatives that are being undertaken to add more number of buses to ensure that the first time in India, any government has made a commitment of 1,000 pure electric buses. At the same time, measures being taken to improve the safety, the reliability, the convenience. Delhi is the first city to really have a truly city-wide common mobility card. We are offering a 10% discount, making it affordable, because the moment you reduce the fares of public transport, more and more people use public transport. That's basic economics. And that's exactly what we're trying to do.
Tanvi,
but let's not frame this debate as because other measures, pollution is such a big issue that no single measure is going to be a silver bullet. We are not saying that electric vehicles policy, as ambitious as we have tried to make it, is going to.
So here is what I want to say. You may say that we are not saying that this is the only policy that is going to solve the pollution problem of the city, but you are asking people to change the way they live starting 2019, which is just a few months ago. Later.
Tanvi,
you are asking people to either start paying more money for their petrol car or a diesel car, or to shift to an electric vehicle by 2019. You are asking people to pay the price for failures of your government and other governments when you do not have an immediate public transport system in place. My problem is that.
Tanvi,
yes, Vimlendu, coming to you. My problem is that when you do not have a public transport system that will help people give up on their private cars and move there immediately, then do you have the right to start taxing them additionally? That's the point that even earlier in the debate Bhavrin was raising. Fine, do it by all means, maybe 2 years, 3 years later. Get your public transport in place.
No.
How are you expecting people to move from one location to the station?
Just 1 second, Jasmine.
Yes, Vimlendu. Go ahead, please.
Yeah. So, Jasmine, you were promising us 1,000 buses next year. Our deficit is at least 7,000 minimum. That's the bare minimum buses that you need. You're giving me 15% of what Delhi is going to need.
Do you know how much of land?
No, that's not called governance. Do you know how much you should actually give me 10,000. No, let me finish. Jasmine, I didn't intervene when you were speaking. Jasmine, can I finish first? So I'm saying that from our priority point of view, I can understand your challenges. I'm really glad that LG hasn't figured in our debate so far. And I'm very glad that hasn't come. And it might genuinely be your problem. And I completely have, I have sympathy for you in that sense. But please understand that there is a deficit of 7,000 buses that Delhi has. You're giving me 1,000 more buses. That too in 2019, when last 4 years I've been breathing bad air. See, I can understand the nuance of governance and the LG versus CM politics. But an average citizen who's dying on the streets of Delhi, he or she doesn't understand this, please. Sorry? You're getting 1,000 electric buses more, right?
No, I'm saying it is 3. I would like to correct you.
When it happens, when it comes?
No, but total of 3,000 buses, 2,000 are CNG buses and 1,000 are electric buses. Total of 3,000 new buses are at different stages of procurement. And we expect all of them to hit the streets.
Jasmine, you have worked on transport policy.
February of 2019 to December of 2019.
Jasmine, do you know the deficit? Deficit is of at least 7,000 to 8,000. Do you know the deficit is of at least 7,000 to 8,000 buses in Delhi? We only talk about one mode of transport, and we only talk about buses right now. So I'm not saying that these 3,000 shouldn't come. I'm glad you're bringing it.
Yes.
I'm glad
so
you're
in fact, on that note of public transport,
there are many.
If I can just come in there, Vimlendu, okay, we've lost the line with Dr. Sarkar. We're just going to connect with him again. Go ahead and finish your point meanwhile. Yes. So we have a high deficit of buses, which is obviously
so similar
not going
to that.
To
so we have that deficit, Tanvi. Yeah, so we have that deficit. We have a deficit
let me just
come in with a point here.
We all know the PWD, the same departments that we're talking about. There's construction dust. What our only request to Jasmine, because I know Jasmine is a very responsible policy influencer, policy maker, and many other people. I'm not questioning their intent in many ways, but at the end of the day, a common breathing citizen of Delhi wants to see tangible changes, rather sheets and sheets of 20-point green budget or a 50-page green agenda. Reality is, Jasmine, because of your reason, maybe you're not directly involved, but you've been in government at the end of the day, and an average citizen of Delhi is actually dying, and therefore you need to do 20 more things rather than 20 more points and 20 more policy papers. Okay. Reality is that, yes, trees have been chopped in Delhi last couple of years. Reality is that there's construction and demolition dust that's been polluting. Reality is that Badarpur power plant only got shut down on October 15th. Reality is that there's no sprinkler that's been installed in any part of Delhi. These water mist and water towers and all not whatever that you've been talking about. So there is a fundamental problem at every level, across political parties, across political dispensations, be it municipality, state government and central government. And I will not give you my vote or my thumb because you've come up with a policy. Show me clean air. That's about it. That's going to be my denominator to really think that you are a better governance person.
Yes, and show me clean air by acting on all of these angles, not just expecting the citizen to give up on everything and to toe the line, because that's the easiest to do. It's the easiest to come out with this policy and say, hey, you either pay a little bit more for your petrol car or diesel car, or hey, either you pay a little bit more for your Uber and for your Ola, even though we are failing to give you a good public transport service, even though we are failing to do every single of those things that Vimlendu Judge just pointed out. Ashim Sanyal wanted to come in, and then I'll go across to Bhavreen. Ashim, go ahead, please.
Yeah, just one point that I want to make, Tanvi, and that is basically it's very important for us to understand that when when Delhi introduced the metro system, in fact, it was said that that was one of the major aspects of that is basically it's going to clear out the pollution because pollution existed then also, in fact, not as high as this. The point is basically a lot of diversion took place of people traveling by metros, but then today the situation is far alarming. So again, I think I'm going to say again that one track approach is not going to solve the problem. It's going to burden the consumers, most of the consumers. And secondly, one must keep in mind that it is not economic aspect, it is a health aspect that we are looking into when we talk of polluting Delhi, in fact. And we are talking of our children, and we are talking of people who are old, and they are suffering not because they're going out and using the roads, they're suffering within their premises, in fact, and that is basically because of multiple reasons. Now, unless the Delhi government addresses these issues simultaneously, so along with the policy paper of green transport, probably Delhi government has to announce many more policy papers, make a sum up of the entire thing and present it to a expert committee and say, look, will this reduce the pollution by so and so percentage, in fact. That's the wholesome deal, in fact. It's absolutely perfect for you to announce a green transport policy. There's no harm in that, and it's in fact welcome. But then this alone again is going to act like a buffer station for pumping in a lot of money into the system. And most importantly, as a consumer, I hate to depend on the facilities that are provided. I would say the so-called undependable facilities that are provided by the government, because they invariably fail because of infrastructure management and other issues.
Right.
So this is the major worry that I have, that most of it is dependent on the government.
Bhavreen wanted to come in, and then we have
be very, very proactive.
Yes, absolutely. Bhavreen wanted to come in, and then we have a few viewers on the phone line. Go ahead, Bhavreen. Yeah. Yes, I mean even when it came to the odd and even scheme, while the debate was largely on whether it or not it will help, but even when it came to the implementation, you saw even people finding ways to circumvent the whole thing and still end up using the vehicles. You saw way too many exemptions coming into place, which effectively meant diluted the entire scheme, and at the end of the day, those who were honestly trying to follow that scheme struggled because there was no supporting public transport. How do you get to your metro station? How do you get to your nearby bus stand if you don't have the public transport to help you get to that point and then travel further? How do you even make Absolutely. How do you make the travel safe for women in a city where crime rate is so high? Why should I give up on my private vehicle? Implementation, that's going to be a big challenge, Jasmine, whichever policy you come out with. Karthik is on the phone line from Pune. Let's listen into some of our viewers. Go ahead, Karthik. What would you like to say?
Yes, my first point is, why should people pay the tax? Why should they take the burden, right? It's the government's job. Now, for example, government should create a strong infrastructure for e-vehicles, right? I mean, for example, as just rightly mentioned, that we can stop the gradual the manufacturing of diesel and petrol cars and trucks. Gradually, we can stop, and the government should create a strong infrastructure for e-vehicles. Because why the citizens should pay the tax? Already they are burdened with unemployment, other taxes, inflation, and the governments only call all the multinationals. Okay, they only call all the car manufacturers. So people have the choice to buy. Now it's up to the government to solve this issue. Why we should pay the tax?
All right, Karthik. Point taken. Thanks so much for calling in. One more caller before we go back to Jasmine Shah to respond to all of those. Okay, we've lost that line. So, Jasmine, the ball is in your court. Your response to what people are saying.
Sure. Yep. So I think the point was made as to why should people shell up anything to have the city transition to cleaner fuel and cleaner technology. And I actually beg to disagree with that point of view, because if we believe that it is the government's task alone to do each and everything that is necessary to clean up the environment and citizens have no responsibility at all, I do not see that we are headed into a good future. And while we always aspire and want to compare our city with the top international global cities, let's also understand what have some of the big cities, some of the the names that we really admire, Singapore, Ontario in Canada, Norway, Netherlands, France, Austria, Denmark. All these countries have been successful at different levels into transition to electric vehicles because they have adopted something called the fee-based policy. And the fee-based policy is a well-accepted norm in environment policy regulation, where essentially the polluters pay for polluting the environment. Now, this does not mean that it is a matter of policy design as to how much tax or how much cess a polluter should pay. But the fact that, yes, the initial transition to electric vehicles is very crucial. There have been many attempts made by the central government and some state governments to cause that transition. But so far in India, we have not seen that kind of a large-scale transition. And if we have to do that, it means that the government will definitely do its job. The government will put in a policy and a set of incentives so that the price of electric vehicles for the first time will be at par with the conventional vehicles. The government will do all it can to put the charging infrastructure in place every 3 kilometers in Delhi. But at the same time, the entire budget that will go into funding this kind of an ambitious plan, of course, some of it will be funded by the Delhi government budget. But I feel it is entirely fair to follow the global norm in terms of having some of the polluting vehicles and especially diesel vehicles. While we are talking about all of these things, we're also saying that it is not an equal charge that all the petrol and diesel vehicles will pay, but we know that diesel is a known carcinogen and a health hazard, and we need to start differentiating and causing that disincentive for anybody today who decides or is taking a decision to own a diesel vehicle, that not only will I pay a higher upfront price,
so
but
you are
going
saying,
forward as well,
so here is the difference,
and I think additional charges will be levying.
Which is why largely people are also asking this question. Are you saying that you will charge people who today decide to buy a diesel car? Or are you saying you're still going to charge people who 2 years ago or 3 years ago, when the policy was more favorable towards diesel cars, they decided to buy it and they will now have to pay additional tax on it?
No, so the policy lays out a range. So it has set a framework. As you can see from the draft policy, this is the first draft policy Delhi government has introduced on electric vehicles. And as far as funding the various expenditures and building a strong charging infrastructure, which any city in India lacks, it has put out a set of ideas which have so far only been talked about, and some of it is, the pollution cess, which is a cess on fuel, and of course if a small cess is put on fuel, then all vehicles in the past also have to pay for it. But let me also say, there is already a diesel cess that is being paid by those who ply diesel vehicles in Delhi. And then there is a fee on road tax, as well as there is budgetary support. So as I said, there are a slew of different cesses as well as budgetary support from Delhi government, which will fund the electric vehicle plan.
Okay.
But the primary goal is for the government to first put together a framework that peoples and individuals can shift towards electric vehicles.
Okay, well, the idea of this conversation was to bring forward the concerns of the people and put it across, because the Delhi government also, when they released the draft policy yesterday, did want to hear from the people, which is why we thought we should do this. And I'm just going to read out a couple of more views, because I can't take more callers. But even Sunil, who called up from Delhi, said, why should common people have to bear the burden of tax? This should have been sorted out earlier. Why should I pay the tax? I have a car now, but I use metro. Abhinav called from Delhi to say, what happened to the odd and even rule? What are they going to do about that now? Raja was on the phone line, but we ran out of time. But Raja said, even if it is for a political agenda, if it is a favorable thing, then it is good. I think we've reached the end of the tunnel in case of pollution. In other countries, you can't own a car. Delhi has to go that way. If I can't go out of my house, then it is a problem. And I think I completely agree with Raja. If you can't get out of your house because the pollution is so bad, if you're sitting indoors and your eyes are still watering and your throat is still paining, then the situation is dire. And while we make the government accountable, while we pressurize the government to ensure that they do their job well, perhaps it is time for citizens also to step back and introspect a little about what they can do to contribute to make it better. If it means giving up on your current car and shifting to another mode of transport, then let's just do that. Of course, the government needs to ensure that there is a sound public infrastructure system for people to give up on private vehicles and move that side. But to the citizens of Delhi and to other cities also, where the air quality isn't that any better, think about it, viewers. Do you want to breathe cleaner air? Or do you simply want to drive around in a fancy car as you ruin the world around you and your own health? I am not in Delhi today. I am not struggling to breathe that toxic air. So perhaps it is not my decision. But I think the people of Delhi need to sit back and think. Every single step depends on you. Whether it's the firework ban, or it's the move to electric vehicles, or general movement towards public transport. It is up to you to work along with your government to make this happen for your own city. Thank you for joining us.